Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Why the Mountains podcast with me, your host, Stephen Farley. In this episode, we will continue with the second half of our interview with Anselm Murphy. But before we get to that, since it is early April 2026, it's worth just giving a shout out to the 9 Irish climbers attempting to summit Mount Everest this year. First of all, Robert Smith, originally from Omagh in County Tyrone, but now based in Scotland, who I interviewed in episode 15, is the expedition leader for the Adventure Consultants team. Adventure Consultants, as you may know, have been around since the company was formed by Rob Hall and Gary Ball in 1991 in New Zealand. They were quickly joined by Guy Cotter and threw themselves straight into guiding the highest peaks in the world. Alpine Ascents International, an American company, Himalayan Kingdoms based in Bristol in the UK, and Outdoor Trekking, another British-based company, all had similar ideas of guiding clients to the summit of Everest. However, it was Adventure Consultants, followed closely by Alpine Ascents International, who made history on May 12, 1992, by guiding the first clients to the top of the world. They continued to have great success for the next few years until the Everest tragedy of 1996, where guides and clients from Adventure Consultants, Mountain Madness, a company led by an American called Scott Fisher, and others tragically lost their lives descending from the summit of Everest in a deadly storm. This is a topic I will return to in a future episode. Since the 1990s, when Guy Cotter took over the reins, Adventure Consultants has become one of the most well-known and successful guiding companies operating in the Himalayas and around the world. Rob Smith has been guiding for Adventure Consultants for years now and leads this year's Everest expedition. If Rob makes the top this year, it will be his 10th summit of Everest. Jason Black, who I interviewed in episodes 12 and 13, is an experienced high-altitude mountaineer and guide from Donegal. Jason made a successful summit of Everest in 2013 and followed this up by becoming the third Irish person to stand on the summit of K2. Jason has his own company called Black Mountaineering, and he leads an expedition to Everest this year, comprising of 3 other climbers. Adam Sweeney, a student from Dunmore East in Waterford, whom I interviewed in episode 22 of the podcast. This is Adam's first attempt at Everest, having previous success on Aconcagua and Ama Dablam. He is joined on the Jason Black team by 2 others, Padraig O'Hora, a former Mayo County footballer, and Anna McGowan, a Dubliner currently living in Switzerland. 3 Irishmen are attempting Everest with the Climbing the Seven Summits team also. They are Andy Nolan, 46 years old from Charleville in Cork, Philip Collins, 38 years old from Abbeyfield in County Limerick, and Jierben Morrissey, 60 years old from Athlone in County Westmeath. Lastly, but certainly not least, is Sarah Armstrong, 31 years old from Crossmaglen in County Armagh, climbing with AGA Adventures. Being from Armagh myself, it is great to see someone from the county heading back to Everest. Both Linda Blakely, interviewed in episode 19 of the podcast, and Terence Banjo Bannon, interviewed in episodes 9, 10 and 11, have successfully summited Everest and hail from County Armagh. I wish Sarah, and indeed all 9 Irish climbers, all the very best for their expeditions, and will follow them closely over the next 6 odd weeks. Also at Everest Base Camp is John McManus, founder of Earth's Edge, who is attempting to climb Lhotse without supplemental oxygen. His second attempt at Lhotse, and 5th attempt at an 8,000 metre peak, without the use of supplemental oxygen. And best of luck to Jam in his endeavours. You can follow all the climbers on Instagram and other places as well. It would be great to see them all achieve their dreams by making the summit and back down safely. A big shout out to Paul Devaney and his amazing Irish7summits.com website for much of the info on the Irish climbers. His website remains the go-to location for information on Irish efforts on the highest mountains in the world. I also interviewed Paul in episodes 16 and 17 of the podcast. Please do check out his amazing story. Now, the second part of our interview with Anselm Murphy. Enjoy.
Coming down wasn't as smooth as going up. Like when I got to the down the hilly step across the summit ridge to the south summit, just at the south summit, then looking down, you can see the South Col, but it's still very far away. And there was some climber who wasn't doing very well there with probable like haste.
Mm-hmm.
And his guide, I think he was a guy called Tim Ripple, was like trying to like get him to continue, but like the typical thing you'll get at high altitude is someone just sitting down and sort of refusing to move.
Mm.
And he, at one point, like when like his guide was like just trying to like explain to him, like, real, hey, look, I'm trying to help you. Listen to me. If you don't get up and start moving and like come with me, you'll die. You've got to move. And like, despite that, like kind of kicking at him with crampons on. So like, not to blame the guy. Clearly he was suffering from haste, so he doesn't know what he's doing. But quite a bad situation. And stayed there for like a little bit, or maybe a bit longer than a little bit, like an hour or two, because they had like taken a bit of rope so that they could use this to kind of like, just have him slide down and hold on to it. And a few people were like helping with that to just like hold the rope. But basically feeling like a bit useless, a bit out of my depth type thing. Then after I'd been there for about 2 hours and I looked at my oxygen, I was like, oh, this is getting a bit worrying because I'm still at like 8,700 meters or so, and it's definitely going to run out. So then I just decided to start going down again. So did David, who was the Australian in my team. So we started going down. And then because this has all taken a very long time, getting down to the South Col ended up taking about 10 hours, which is a lot longer than usual. And like by that time, night has fallen. And I think at around 8,300 to 200, like a bit under the balcony, my oxygen ran out. And that's not great, especially when it's dark.
Right.
But it's not like a super dramatic thing like, oh no, it's gone and you like fall to the ground. Not like much subtler, but everything just becomes that much harder. Really have to force yourself to keep going and like keep wanting to like find a place to like just sit down just for a bit. And like almost like you have sort of like two different voices in your mind. Like one is just like drifting you towards doing that, and the other is like shouting, don't, that's stupid, definitely don't do that. So just force yourself to keep going, which I managed to do. Got down, and then so everyone else has got down. Jamie's down as well. We saw a Sherpa as we're coming down who's going up with some oxygen to help this guy from Oman who was actually fine in the end. Like they got him down okay. So yeah, it was a very long day. It was like 13 hours up, 10 hours down, something like that.
Oh my word, that is a big day.
Yeah. And then just woke up the next day and it was like, oh, I better get down off the South Col. This is too high for too long. And I remember I borrowed, I think, Jamie's satellite phone on the summit to call my parents, and like they didn't answer. So then I called like my brother on the South Col before leaving, and like just blurted it out as quickly as possible to like be cost effective because you're paying by the minute. All right, summited South Col going down. Hope to be back in base camp in a couple of days, type thing. And yeah, it's just like quite a long, slow climb down the Lhotse face, and then like finally get to the bottom of that, feel a lot of relief because then you're past the point of like being so debilitated by the altitude. And then like one more day to get back to base camp the next day, and that is a nice feeling to get through the icefall for the last time. We were like hanging around base camp for a few days to get like all yaks and porters and things organized, and then just had like a normal leisurely hike down. And I remember like, even though I'd been at base camp at that point for like 6 weeks or so and thought I was like pretty well acclimatized, which I was, the first night down, like wherever it was stayed that first night, it's like 1,000 meters lower. I could not believe what a good night's sleep I had, because it was also in a tea house, so it was like in a bed, 1,000 meters lower, and just woke up feeling like I didn't know it was possible to like feel this good again.
For many, Everest is the end of their 8,000-metre dreams, but Anselm was by no means finished, finding his way back to the Himalayas a few years later to take on another 8,000-metre giant, Kanchenjunga.
So that was 3 years later, so it was 2011, and I was still like in the intervening years, I was still like super keen about mountaineering. I was just like paying the price for going on a sort of like mountaineering blitz for several years of like having to pay back all the money I'd borrowed for Everest. And I was doing that in the least efficient way by working in like an outdoor shop in London and earning like slightly over minimum wage. So it took a long time. But there I did get to like meet a lot of, like-minded people who want to do the same stuff. And you kind of had to like acknowledge like, yeah, I am determined. I've managed to climb Everest, but I'm not actually a very good mountaineer. And that's pretty common of people who climb Everest. Like, if you're lucky and fit and determined and have like basic skills, it's possible to do it, especially now. But the fact that you got lucky doesn't mean that you're good.
Mm-hmm.
So for those few years, I was doing a lot more sort of like skills-based stuff with friends I met. So, would go to like do ice climbing and, Welsh winter stuff, and like just get better at the technical skills of mountaineering. So in my mind, I was still thinking I want to go back to the Himalayas, but I want to be stronger, more self-sufficient, feel comfortable in any situation. I remember like at the time reading about the 2008 K2 like disaster that Jer McDonald was in and many other people, and reading about how like on a big part of the problem there was that the Serrat collapse cut the ropes across the bottleneck traverse, and like it sounded like some people there were just like kind of a bit, all right, we're done. Like it's not confident to like climb that without ropes there. Like that is not a situation I want to be in. It's quite avoidable. Obviously, that's not going to be easy at that altitude, but you should be comfortable enough that you're able to climb it, because it's crazy not to really on like a mountain that serious. So I'd spent several years like trying to get better, basically paying off debts, and in the back of my mind thinking I want to try something else like this. And when rewinding a few years, just before I left Kathmandu after Everest, I'd gone to like a barbecue at Jagged Globes Hotel because my friends were there, and I met Ted Atkins there. Have you heard of Ted Atkins?
The name rings a bell, but you could explain who he is again?
Yeah, so he was an ex-RAF officer, who had left the RAF a few years earlier because he'd got very into mountaineering. He'd been doing he'd been doing it for years. He was in his 50s at the time, I think. And he was an ex-engineer that worked on helicopters and other things. And he'd been on several military expeditions and that kind of stuff. And he'd left the RAF to develop his own oxygen mask, because at the time, most people used, or like a few years before, they used this Russian Poisk mask that's basically like a MiG mask that's not very efficient for all sorts of reasons. And he was like, oh, I can do better than this because I'm an engineer. So he developed the top out mask. And because I happened to randomly meet him at that barbecue, I was on like some kind of list, like email list he had. And then 3 years later, he sent an email out to everyone he knew saying he wants to climb Kanchenjunga, third highest mountain in the world. And I was the only one that got back to him.
Right. With the purpose of trying out his new oxygen gear, is that it?
Not really, no, because Top Hat was already established at the point like 3 years prior to that.
Oh, okay.
He was always improving it. But the kind of main reason that expedition was even happening is because when he had climbed Everest a few years before me, can't remember the year, maybe between 2004 and 2007, I think, something like that. He had like run out of oxygen super high, I think, like maybe above the Hillary step or like, dangerously high. And a Sherpa named Mingma saved him. He just gave him his oxygen and went down without oxygen, which is super brave and generous thing to do. And then like he found out who that was when he got down, because when this happened, he was all like, in a daze of like, I don't even know what's going on, losing consciousness. But he found out who it was when he got down, and then they became friends. So like they were, seeing a fair bit of each other because Ted was often in Kathmandu for business and stuff. And then over the years, Mingma became pretty accomplished, and he was at the point where if he climbed Kanchenjunga, he would be the first Sherpa to climb all 14 8,000ers. And that's why this expedition was happening. It's sort of like pretty rare that happens, that like, because normally the Sherpas are supporting others.
Yeah.
But in this case, the main aim was so that he could climb it. And he had created his own company, 7 Summit Treks, that are now pretty big. They're probably
No,
biggest
they're
like,
famous.
Sherpa run company.
Yeah.
But this was going to be their first expedition ever. So he needs to get like, Westerners to come along to pay for it. And that's what me and Ted were.
Okay,
so
excellent.
We were like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And he got like several other clients. I think there was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 of them, something like that altogether. But while sharing base camp, they were in like, different groups of teams, and like Ted and I agreed to kind of go as a team together. So yeah, I guess the moral of that story is if you meet a strange 50-year-old guy at a barbecue and 3 years later he says, "Do you want to climb Kanchenjunga?" Give it a go. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, and to date you're the only Irish citizen to have summited Kanchenjunga. Noah Hanna tried it a couple of years in a row. Didn't get to the top. So I know you had an experience on the way down with an injured climber, but what was the climb up like? I mean, I don't know much about Kanchenjunga. I've seen it from Tiger Hill, just outside Darjeeling on a trip, and it's a pretty magnificent mountain, especially when the sun lights it up in the morning. But it looks extremely dangerous. Could you describe it for us?
Sure. I've seen photos from that vantage point as well, and they're amazing. Because like, especially when I went, like, it was back when you just, like I was saying earlier, you can't get that much information on certain mountains, especially not Kanchenjunga at the time. So I remember like trying to research the route in detail. Like the southwest face is what I climbed, which is the first descent route. It was first climbed in 1955. So a couple of years after Everest, and like just trying to find pictures of different sections of the route. It's really not easy. Like so much of it was more of a mystery, and it's right on the eastern edge of Nepal, border with India, and it's very off the beaten track. Like, you don't get many people going there. In fact, like the whole time I was there on the trek in and out, I think we saw 1 or 2 trekkers. That was it. Everyone else there was there like to climb. I think it's definitely one of the more challenging 8,000ers because it's like third highest, it's 8,586 meters. So basically 8,600. You've got the same like issues of extreme altitude that you do with like Everest and K2. So super high, generally worse weather, steeper, more difficult, tricky route. Not great weather, and much less people climbing it. So, like one of the attractions of doing it is it's more like, especially when first getting into mountaineering and reading like all the stories, the first people who went to attempt this and that mountain, you get a sense of like being out in the wild, and that's not what you get from Everest nowadays, because you've got like tea houses and everything on the way there. And there's so many people at base camp. And I did want to try something that was felt like more of a wild adventure. So, you know, less commercialized and is just more challenging. Like it's, especially at the time I went, it was not safe. It was had like a, I remember the stats. It was basically like a bad summit to fatality rates. There was like 250 people had climbed it, and a bit under 50 had died. So like 1 in 5.
Oh my goodness, that's a high rate.
Yeah.
And that didn't put you off?
Not really. I was pretty like determined to like try something challenging at the time. I think my brother, I'm pretty sure he said like when questioning this, like that's worse odds than Russian roulette. Like this is stupid.
Yeah, when you
But
put it like that.
yeah, but it's not really. That's something actually. When I was looking to all these stats and like, you know, considering how dangerous stuff is, I think people use these kind of stats to make it sound like more daring than it really is. Because if it really was that, no one would do it. That's crazy. Because you're only looking at deaths against successful summits, but there's a lot more people that try it and don't die and don't summit. That's like a much more realistic way to look at risk, but it's hard to get those stats. And it doesn't sound as scary, so people don't usually use them. But like, to put it in context, like K2 at the time was like 25%. This is 20. Everest is probably about 2%. So much more committing, serious kind of climb.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a really pretty remote base camp. Like no one goes there. There's no trekkers going to base camp. So the whole journey there was quite it just felt like a totally different thing, especially because when I went there, most people are going to get a helicopter from Kathmandu to like, I don't know, 3,500 meters or something, and then trek a few days to base camp. I could not afford that. So I took the cheaper option of getting like a bus from Kathmandu to like Kanchenjunga National Park and then start trekking from like 1,000 meters. So it took like over 2 weeks to get to base camp all that time with the Sherpas, and like Ted wasn't there yet. He had business in Kathmandu. No one else had joined yet. So it's quite a different experience to like start that way. On the way, like second or third day of the trek, I met these other guys. There was another team that was going to climb it, and it was going to be at our base camp, and it was 2 Italians and a Polish guy and a Romanian guy. And we became pretty good friends, so we'd hang out with them quite a lot. And Romanian guy's Alex Gavan, who's like sort of a professional mountaineer. He manages to kind of like make a living from being one of Romania's like high altitude mountaineers. And the Polish guy, Paweł Michalski, is like a professor at I think he teaches economics university in Poland, but somehow he's managed to arrange his life so he's always on like 1 or 2 expeditions a year, and like is well known enough in Poland that they're just paid for, he doesn't need to worry about it type thing. So they're quite good, and they're like, oh, like you're going to use oxygen, you lose it. Like that very different like attitude to what you get on Everest. It's like, oh, you know, you're not serious if you're thinking of using oxygen.
Yeah.
And the Italian guys, one of them was Antonio, the other one was Mario Panzeri, and this was going to be his last 8,000er. If he managed it, he would have done all 14, I think. Or did he have one more? It was either his last one or his second last one, but all without oxygen as well. So dealing with like a very different type of clientele to what you would, you know, like the people that I would meet on Everest.
Absolutely. And did you feel you fitted into that kind of crew?
No, not at all. I was like, oh my God, like complete imposter. What am I doing here? Because like, especially leading up to it, it's easy to be flippant and be like, oh, you know, I was just like committed to it. And I was, but I was definitely scared leading up to it, like in sort of training period. I'd managed to like, I was certainly fitter than I was for Everest, probably more or less the best shape I'd been, but it's hard not to worry about it a bit. And there was one point where I just got like super worried about it. And also, it's like, it's beyond sort of, I'm beyond broke. Like, I'm negative money, like being borrowed to do this as well. And I'm just thinking, oh God, like, is it time that I need to try and get a proper job? Because like, how long can I keep doing this? Like, of like having nothing. And I was really worried about it. I was getting worried about like the risk. And I actually typed out an email to Ted to say, sorry, I can't come for all of these reasons. And then I just decided, what, sleep on it and see how you feel in the morning. And then in the morning, I deleted it and went ahead with it. And my life would have been so different if I had not gone ahead with that.
Right. Okay. But you were so close.
Yeah. But I definitely
Wow.
found that, like, it's the worrying about stuff that's scary. It's scarier than doing it. Like, when I actually started, the trek, instantly felt better. It's like the kind of like ruminating and worrying about what will happen, this and that, that's bad. And like, then when further on in the expedition, when you get to base camp and you're like waiting for weather windows and stuff, the worrying about stuff. But as soon as you're like doing something and taking action, at least for me, that helps a lot with the worry.
No, I think that's true. I think the thought of doing something is always worse than the actual doing of it, for sure, even in this case. So, Anselm, I don't know much about Kanchenjunga. How do you go about getting to the top of that one? Is it like siege style, similar to Everest, up and down? Is there an ice fall? Is there objective dangers like that? Or
it is, it's definitely siege style like Everest. They've got base camp at about 5,500 meters. Then you've got 4 camps. Top one is about 7,500. So you've got a very long summit day on it. It's like 1,100 meters, which is longer than like Everest South Side. And it does actually have a very big ice fall, but the route that I took and that most people take just neatly sort of sidesteps that on a ridge. Base camp to camp 1 is like a lot of it is on a snow slope going up a ridge. Then you traverse a bit, and then you go up a section of like reasonably steep snow and ice, and you kind of get to like a nice little ridge where you can set a camp that's like, well, the terrain is like pretty good for shielding you from wind. Camp 2 is only another 200 vertical meters higher, but it's a longer way away horizontally, and you sort of like go into off your ridge into a valley. You kind of have to see a photograph to like understand the layout is a bit weird, and you're like traversing across the side of the valley, and then you go down into I guess like a mini version of the Western Coombe, but much smaller. Then you've got like a camp there where there like to be many avalanches going off all the time, but usually safe enough distance from the camp. But I do remember one day like waking up and there was like a sort of a fridge-sized block of ice just sitting there like between 2 tents that wasn't there before.
oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing with freak out for sure.
Yeah. Because then like the route after that, you go up some easy snow for a bit, and then you've got like a sort of a steeper section of like intermittent like steeper sections of ice. And then you're following that all the way up to about 7,000 meters where you have the third camp. And then you've got like one fairly steep bit of ice to start that off. And then to get to the 4th camp, you are on reasonably easy terrain, like gentle snow, but loads of crevasses. So it's a very winding route. And then from the 4th camp to the top is the hardest part, like physically and technically. It's just a really long way because so much of it is just up a massive steep, like ever steepening snow ramp to begin with. And especially because it's like, in Everest you'll have like 500 people at base camp. This base camp had about like 45 people or something. Not all of them are there at once. So there'll be times that you go on a route and no one has been there for a few days and you're having to wade through like waist deep snow, which is like a completely different thing to how you'd be climbing Everest. So yeah, that makes it tougher. And then summit day is just so relentlessly, like, it's really steep enough that like you can't really rest, but not steep enough that it's like super scary, like probably between like 35 to 50-degree snow slope for like really long way. And then you get to like a rocky section. I do remember like a bit on that snow slope when it was like in the dead of night. I kept thinking that there was someone behind me because I kept seeing this like light from a blue head torch, and then like stopping and like very carefully turning around in the slope to look behind me because it's like awkward to turn around kind of steepness, and there's like no one there. And it happened 2 or 3 times, and I started to get worried, like, because like there was no one that close, no one remotely near beneath me. Am I hallucinating? And then a few minutes later, I'd stopped and like turned around to like look at the vista ahead of me, because so much of this, all you're seeing is like a bit of snow in front of you. And then so I wanted to appreciate it, even though it's night, you could see a bit with moonlight illumination. And I saw what it was. In the distance, every now and again, there was like intermittent lightning. And it was lighting up like everything from like just a flash of blue light. I was like,
Yeah.
it's a pretty cool thing to see.
That sounds pretty cool. All right. It
Yeah.
sounds more dangerous than Everest. Would you? I mean, setting aside the height difference, is it a harder climb?
I would say I found it probably tougher overall. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you've got like every inch of Everest has fixed ropes, which helps a lot. On this like fairly large stretches of like the climb to the summit didn't have fixed ropes, like only put in on the bits where it's steeper and you kind of think you need it on rocky steps and stuff like that. So yeah, if you're not paying attention or just make a mistake, like a lot potentially more serious.
And did you take the same route as, was it Joe Brown and George Band?
Yep.
Is that who first climbed it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a British first descent. Did you take the same route?
Yeah, southwest face.
The southwest face. That's the same one that they climbed, right? Back in the 1950s.
Yep.
So summit day, everything went well. You felt good on the summits. What was it like then on the way down? You came across a climber that was in trouble on the way down, and you seemed to get quite involved in that. Would you mind talking us through that, Anselm?
Sure. So there was this Brazilian American climber who was like sharing base camp, so part of Mingma's group, but like sort of climbing separately, because Ted and I were like a team climbing together. And she had hired 3 Sherpas to help her. So she had like 3 Sherpas like aiding her throughout the climb. And she had reached the summit basically the same time that I had. And then unbeknownst to me at the time, on the way down, she had like a minor fall, like not like, it's going to cause serious damage, but enough that she hit her knee and injured her knee a bit, which is not a good thing at that altitude. And then in that, she lost her goggles. So she got down to high camp, but by the next day, she was snowblind because she'd not had any eye protection for that time. And her knee was a bit messed up. So the first I was aware of this was when I started to climb down the next day, like aiming to get to base camp from camp 4. So starting between 7.5, 7,600 meters. Not using oxygen anymore. And I saw her in the distance. She'd already started going down. She was with her Sherpas, but they were like moving painfully slow, taking like, a couple of steps and like stopping type thing. So Ted and I stopped to find out what was going on. And it looked like she might have haste or something like that based on the speed she was moving. So Ted convinced us to take a shot of dexamethasone. And we agreed I would go down to camp 3 as quick as I could to find something that could be used to mark out an area so the helicopter could get it. Because just above camp 3, there's like a fairly flat area that would be like a suitable spot. So the idea was like get some Gatorade type thing or something like that and mark something out that can be seen. So I went ahead to try and do that while Ted was with her and the Sherpas and everyone. And during this time, everyone is sort of gradually going down the mountain who's summited the previous day. And as I got down towards Camp 3, I just started getting slower and slower because I'm pretty exhausted. We had like on the way up, we'd spent extra day at like over 7,000 meters waiting for weather and stuff. So yeah, we kind of glossed over it, but summit day was tough. Like, you know, similar deal to Everest of like you're counting 10 steps, you're keeling over, you're breathing deeply for like 30 seconds, like that kind of thing. And like, you know, most food is gone now. So not feeling super strong, but eventually got there. I got some like energy drink or something. And that was like the most like strange experience of like, oh, like a cartoon, put fuel in, all of a sudden have energy. Like, 'cause it was just my body was depleted. But then by the time I'd got there, weather had got worse, very cloudy. There's no way a helicopter's going to get here today. So Ted comes down and he said, okay, I managed to convince her to take some decks. And she's coming down slowly with her Sherpas. While this is all going on, Ted and I are discussing what to do. And there's about like 30 people or so who had summited the day before. And most of them are like filtering through the camp and going down. And we just chatted about it and said, well, this doesn't look very good. We should probably see if we can stay up if that's possible. And we need to see if we can get oxygen and stuff because we don't know how long this is going to go on for. So we started asking Sherpas who are going down or like anyone who's going past, can you just leave this oxygen? We need it to help this climber. Eventually we got like not very much. We got like 1 2/3 full bottle and 1 half or something like that. Like not great, but not that bad. So then they're also, some of the Sherpas were kind of keen on just clearing the mountain, taking all the gear down. So we had to kind of like have a pretty strongly worded argument to get them to leave a tent that we were going to stay in so that we could help. And we talked to the Sirdar and said, okay, if you know, if this helicopter thing doesn't work tomorrow, then send people up to help. But like everyone was going down. So long story short, everyone has gone past Camp 3 on their way down to base camp now. And myself and Ted are left at Camp 3 around 7,100. And this climber and her 3 Sherpas is eventually gets to about 100 meters above us, which is like up a bit of steep ice on like the flatter area where a helicopter might be able to land. She had a satellite phone, so she'd contacted like the rescue company to try and organize a B3 helicopter, which at the time, it was like fairly new. I think it's used quite a lot now, but it's the helicopter that can get reasonably high. But still, where she was like really pushing it because it had never, I think the highest it had been used before to like pick someone up was 6,900. She's probably about 200 meters over that.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, by this time, like most of the day is gone. So we're just getting settled in. And one of her Sherpas came down and we gave him some oxygen and said, give her this, make sure she uses it throughout the night. And we gave him, you know, gas and water and stuff. And then some slightly bizarre stuff happened where like half an hour later, he came back to us with the oxygen and said she doesn't want it. Never really got a good explanation for what happened there. But anyway, we had a very uncomfortable night of, you know, we've hardly got any food left. We don't have oxygen. And yeah, felt pretty grim. I remember having very distinctly waking up the next morning after like probably having like 2 hours total of intermittent sleep where you're like, you know, nearly out of it. And having that feeling where you've just woken up and you can't remember like where you are. And I was like, oh God, I'm still here.
Still here.
But,
Still up here.
yeah. So then we climbed up the ice, took her the oxygen, got her to use it, gave her another shot of Dex. And then a helicopter did turn up. This is like early in the morning. And it tried to get her with a long line where like, you know, just dangles a line, clip her onto it. But after making several attempts, it wasn't able to, it was too high, didn't have enough power, kept sinking when it was trying to hover. So then it just had to leave. So then one of the Sherpas leaves, and we said, right, we've just got to get down, come with us. We just got to make it down to the next camp. So we start going down. We get down to where we'd spent the night, like 100 meters below, and we start packing up the tent because we're going to need that. Like, we're going to go super slow with her.
Yeah.
And we said to the 2 remaining Sherpas, no, start going down. We're going to catch you. So it took us like an hour and a half or longer to pack up the tent because everything's in slow motion at high altitude. And then I start climbing down, and within like 5 minutes of climbing down, I found her by herself, unconscious, like face down on the snow slope. So I went over, like shook her, got her awake, cleared the air intake on her like oxygen mask, and was like, what's going on? What happened? She wasn't very clear. She mentioned that she thought there was a crevasse there. I didn't see any crevasse. Don't know where the Sherpas have gone.
Sherpas are gone at this stage?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like about an hour and a half or 2 hours has elapsed since they've gone away. And this is only 5 minutes lower climb than where we were. So it must have happened very shortly after they left. So just turned up our oxygen like higher to kind of like get her picked up. Then Ted appeared like a few minutes later because he was just, slightly behind me. And then we just started climbing down to the next camp, to Camp 2, which is not a good place to be at that point because it was like middle of the afternoon and it's a very avalanche type slope that had fresh snowfall. So yeah, we just kept climbing down. Like one of us in front, one of us behind, her like stepping in our tracks. And then as we got towards Camp 2, one of the Sherpas came up and like met us there. Not one of the Sherpas who'd been with her before, a different one who'd come to collect equipment from Camp 2. And we were just like, okay, let them know, because like her satellite phones run out of battery long ago. Let base camp know where we are at Camp 2. We're going to spend the night here, see if they can send a helicopter for her in the morning. As I got to Camp 2, I met one of the Sherpas that had been with her before, and I said, what the hell happened? And he wasn't really clear on what had happened. He said that she'd asked him to go down. All of this is very murky, never really got a clear picture of what happened. So anyway, we spent another night there, Ted, myself, and this climber. And we, it's like 6,400, so it's not like super dangerous altitude anymore. But we've been very high for very long at this point. Then the next morning, very early in the morning, helicopter turned up, it's low enough that it could land. So it just landed, picked her up, whisked her off. Great. And then we just climbed down to base camp that day, and we were very happy to get there.
You saved her life then?
I wouldn't go so far to say that because we don't know what would happen if we weren't there. Like, she may well have just got up. If we weren't there, the Sherpas probably would have gone back up to look for her, something like that.
Okay, well, at least you made a point of helping, which I think is admirable. On the way back down, you must have been exhausted trying to do this. Takes a lot out of you.
Oh yeah, it does. Because like that's all after the summit push. So like normally after you reach the summit, it's just like you get down to base camp as quick as you can. Not you spend like extra days above, 7,000 meters with little food, etc.
Yeah. It just goes to show, I suppose, the fine margins that exist at high altitude, and the higher you are, the finer they are. Things can go wrong so quickly. I've seen that so much in these interviews that I've done over the past few months and couple of years. I don't think anybody who spends any time at high altitude hasn't some sort of experience to talk about, linked to kind of the idea of people being in big trouble, or even worse. It seems to go hand in hand with high altitude, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. And yeah, like that could be anyone as well. Like anyone can get unlucky with altitude sickness, or, just have an accident. Really could happen to anyone who's on a big mountain.
Was there something about the oxygen as well? I read there was some sort of issue with the oxygen that you were trying to get a hold of for to help out.
When we'd got to Camp 3 and people were still filtering through the camp to go down, and Ted and I were trying to get hold of oxygen to help this climber, there was one Sherpa that wouldn't give it to us unless we agreed to pay him like hundreds of dollars for it, which was not great to hear in the circumstance, especially considering it wasn't his oxygen, it was his client's oxygen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You would think the unwritten code is you do whatever you need to do to help. Yeah. So that's
especially since like this climber was like pretty wealthy, they can easily pay for it. Like,
yeah,
it just seemed like a mystifying response to that situation. But you know, we just said, okay, fine, we got it, and then worry about that later.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing, Anselm. I mean, there's very few Irish people, Irish citizens, who have climbed 8,000-meter mountains, and even less who have climbed multiple ones. But you have climbed 3, and it's just the stories you have to tell are amazing. And thank you very much for sharing them with us. Are you? Do you think you look like a very young man? Do you think you're finished with this, or do you have more? Do you have more ambitions to go back?
I'm never say never, but I lean towards probably not another 8,000er. Yeah, I'll like, you know, I went to Carrantall for the first time a couple of years ago. But I really like the mountains. I think I can enjoy them a bit more now as like a trekker, like just enjoying being there without. Before I'd always like feel like, oh, you know, I feel the draw of like trying to do some big challenge, but I'm kind of like a hill walker who got carried away, like rather than a hardcore climber is the way I would think of myself. And I do like that, just being in the mountains. So I'd like to be able to, you know, do more of that when I get time. But especially as you get older, you have like more responsibilities, less flexibility to do that kind of stuff. Like work is demanding. You're never going to have a career if you keep quitting your job every 6 months to go abroad for like several months. So I've got to, yeah, unfortunately, the demands of like just, you know,
just like
everyday life do unfortunately start to take control a little bit. Oh yeah, like I would kind of like to, but I wish it had happened. Like, say, there were several things that nearly got off the ground after this that just didn't for one reason or another. So one was I was planning to go to Nanga Parbat in 2013, and I had sort of like agreed to it and everything, but then in the few months leading up to it, I just got like randomly sick a lot. Nothing serious, but I had like, you know, just a random time when you get the flu and it won't go away for like 6 weeks or something. So I just ruined my training. I thought, well, I don't really feel confident about this. I'm going to not go. Then that was the year that terrorists turned up at base camp and murdered everyone. So that was really lucky that I didn't go. A few years later, like I mentioned earlier on, I was planning to go and try and climb K2 with Ted, the guy that I climbed Kanchenjunga with, and did all the training for it, and then had to pull out because Ted had like a business opportunity to do with his oxygen mask thing that he needed to do instead. So that didn't end up happening either. And then a few years ago, Ted died in a climbing accident, which is quite a sobering thing to happen. So, and you know, there's other people who've climbed these mountains too, like people I've met, like climbed Kanchenjunga and other mountains who've passed away in the mountains. And it just, anyone who's been to the Himalayas a few times will end up knowing several people who have accidents. So on balance, I do think maybe it's best to quit 8,000ers while I'm ahead. But I don't know, never say never. Like, I definitely feel the appeal of it a lot still.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, if you quit now, you're definitely well ahead of the game. So fair play. You've had experiences us mere mortals can only dream of. But I do wish you the best if you ever do go back. I mean, I'm sure Nanga Parbat has had no Irish attempts, even never mind summits. So it would be really interesting to see if somebody could have a go at that and get to the top. Listen, Anselm, it's been absolutely wonderful listening to you. I have taken up 2 hours of your time, and I think it wouldn't be fair to take up any more. You've been very generous with your time. Thanks very much. And you tell the story so well. And fair play to you for starting so young and driving on. I always, when I do these interviews, I think me and all my friends and all the mountain rescue guys, everybody talks about the stuff they'd love to do, but you went and done it, and it's just great listening to you, and fair play, Anselm. And you're half Wexford, but you're fully Irish, so don't let anybody tell you any different.
I hope you enjoyed this chat with Anselm Murphy. It's great to hear in such detail about other mountains apart from Everest, especially mountains like Kanchenjunga, which remain very much a mystery compared to the likes of Everest. As Anselm said, it had worse odds than Russian roulette, which may have been an exaggeration, but still speaks to the objective dangers inherent in any attempts on 8,000 metre mountains. His experience with the climber and difficulties on the way down, the issues that he faced with oxygen, is compelling listening. We will start to broaden our scope in the podcast to all of the 8,000 metre mountains, so this dive into climbing Kanchenjunga with Anselm was part of that. We have some more amazing interviews coming up with some well-known mountaineers, including more Irish mountaineers who have summited Everest and other 8,000 metre mountains, attempted them or aspire to climb them. I also hope to interview a select group of non-Irish mountaineers, and I have the first one in the can, a mountaineer who has summited all 8,000 metre mountains. Look out for those episodes in the coming weeks, and for potential updates on how the Irish guys are getting on Everest. In the meantime, stay safe and stay cool.